Sorry about that. Just cleaning up. There we go. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me just check my stuff here while people are coming in. Very cool. Try to add some light in here. All right.
Hello, Michael.
Hey, how's it going, buddy? Welcome.
Good,
welcome.
you?
Not bad, not bad. A very relaxing weekend. How you doing?
Nice. Pretty good. Yeah, happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter. Very good, very good. Yeah.
Thank you for hosting the event.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell me, Joseph, what kind of studies have you done, or what kind of work have you done in design?
I'm actually an Internet of Things engineer. I'm a software engineer. I do mostly mobile development, so Android and iOS native. And I work with mostly Bluetooth, low energy technology. And as far as UX user interface is concerned, I work on the user interface side of the app. And I just want to learn more about what are some of the details or the ins and outs of the UX industry and how I can apply that to my own work.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I know. Again, yeah, developers always have a really cool point of view. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that designers don't even worry about or don't even think about. And then very often we don't share it with the developers until it's too late. And then they said, oh, this doesn't make any sense. This is totally broken. So yeah, welcome to have you, buddy.
Yeah, well, what about you? Like, what are you a UX developer?
Not a developer. I was a UX designer. Yeah. So
Okay.
exactly, I would basically lead the UX teams in certain projects, and then again, as much as possible, I would try to share it with developers. As I said, as early as possible.
And you have been hosting this event for how long?
I don't know, probably 2 months. It's very new. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just curious, like, what is the reason for it? Are you just like trying to build like a community of developers, or?
Yeah, just build a community. No secret. Yeah, just for fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, this is just kind of my impression, because just based on what I've read about like meetup, like this is like my third meetup. So like my impression was like the organizer of the meetups are usually the people who are running like small startups, or like thinking about starting small startups. And they're like grouping together people who are like like-minded, and then they can all work on like small projects together, help them.
No, I don't have an ulterior motive. Sorry, there's no secret here.
No, it's cool. I mean, like even if that's like your goal, because I was at like the React meetup just like a week ago, and then one of the organizer, I think he was looking for like a developer. They're hiring developers, and then he was like, oh, I might as well let the like my community know about it, and then see if anybody is interested in applying.
Sounds cool. All right, I'm gonna get started.
Okay.
Let me just jump in here. I'm gonna share my screen for a bit. Yeah, welcome everybody. Again, really exciting stuff. Today we're gonna get into the UI design. Again, last week we did a lot of, let me just share my screen here. I said last week we did a lot of kind of wireframes together as a group. And again, wireframes are not too bad because they're kind of visually very simple. And so there's nothing intimidating about them. And very often the wireframes will be enough that you can share them with, possibly share them with the project manager or share them with the client. And the idea is that you want to kind of eke out bad ideas. And obviously, the sooner you can get them, the happier the client's going to be. And you don't want to share a lot of color or style or any of that stuff, because you don't want the client to get distracted about things like font faces and color schemes and that kind of stuff, right? So, as soon as possible, ASAP share these kind of early versions, and obviously you'll go back and forth with the client, and then you'll get them approved. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the UI design. Now, the first thing I would mention is, the visual design is not really the main part of your job. It's a very small element of your job, but it's something that a lot of designers, especially young designers, love, because they feel like if they can make their portfolios look great, it's going to excite hiring managers and so on. So a lot of people really obsess over this stuff because you see a lot of beautiful work on things like Dribble and so on. So again, if you're into this, if you're very creative, that's awesome. But just a little asterisks here. This is not going to necessarily get you phone calls, whereas a case study full of wireframes talking about the decisions you make, that is what people really want to see. So anyway, let's jump in. We'll kind of look at some principles, and at the end of the class, we're going to do a little exercise. We're going to do a live exercise in Figma, and you guys can throw questions at me and so forth. So let's jump in. All right, so I have actually 10 properties here. Seems pretty simple, right? So 10 properties to remember, and after that, we're going to jump into a quick exercise. So the first one I would mention here, and I actually put these in relative order so that the most important stuff is at the top. So the number one thing that I always see when I look at junior designers, maybe they're just using UI design, or maybe they're designing a screen, or I just look at one screen and I can already see issues with hierarchy. So the most important thing is obviously hierarchy starts at the top. It's kind of like a Western Western culture. We would think of the top left as being the most important stuff. That's the first place your eyes are going to look. And starting from the top all the way down, this is where you expect the important stuff to be. I would also say that if you think about a desktop, like a website, for example, you would expect to have making more space, more pixels than you would on the phone. So that implies that if you have less space, it also means that you can just get rid of stuff. So if something is not important enough, you can consider just getting rid of it. I've mentioned this in the past to previous classes where sometimes clients will talk about having a mobile experience, and perhaps the app is very complicated. The app is like a digital finance app or a crypto app or something like that, and you want to look at these complex tables. And sometimes the clients will say, well, I would never do that on my phone. It's too complicated, right? So on the phone, you might have a visual like notifications, or you can just, you can only see, but you cannot interact, right? That's really just because of the hierarchy, right? So first thing you do when you see a screen, if I was looking at Figma right now, is I would look at the most important stuff and I would just drag it to the top of the screen, right? All right. Number two, and this is this is almost like a religious argument that we're making here, is when you talk to the business users, they will very often act as if they know exactly what the users want, right? The business user or their client is basically saying, here's what we want, right? Here's how we want to maximize the business. But at the same time, you got to remember that your role is to defend the users. Your role is to stand up for the users who aren't in the room. And that means, sometimes you gotta make a choice between what the user wants and what the business wants. Now, some of you may have been here a week ago or 2 weeks ago when we looked at examples of the Facebook navigation system, or the Facebook information architecture. And we said that the Facebook is actually really interesting because they've started adding stuff to the UI that users don't necessarily want, right? And that's the case where they've just chosen the business. And it's kind of like an awkward placement, right? So I think your job is to fight for the users as much as possible, right? They're the ones that are going to be using it. They're the ones that are going to be enjoying the app. Okay, number three, and again, this is like one of the most important things, is understanding when to use high contrast items, right? The number one thing that the clients want, or the number one thing that users want, is they want to see the most important stuff right away. They want it to be really obvious. Where is the button that I click to kind of start my login? Where's the click that start my application or sign up or something like that, right? We often call this a CTA or a call to action button. And again, it's a bright blue button right in the middle of the screen, really obvious, right? That's obvious. But what makes it not so obvious is when you have 5 bright blue buttons, or maybe you have a bright blue background, right? So all of a sudden, it's not really contrasting anymore. And it's not really highly saturated because everything's highly saturated, right? So if you really want to get crazy about this, you can say that there is only one CTA on screen and it is super obvious, right? That is actually brilliant design. It means that every user fires up the screen or loads up your page, and the first thing they see, that's the button they're looking for. And it's often, again, to sign up, to register, to log in, those kind of action buttons. Now, if I look at the bottom here, it says like this idea of low contrast. And you might ask yourself, well, why would I ever design text like this? Well, first of all, we often use this kind of text, this kind of low contrast text, in the footer of the page, for if it was a web page, for example. The only real option that I would use is if I wanted to add minor notes to a photo, like name of the photographer or the date or the copyright information, or I wanted to add links at the bottom of the footer, for example. And this kind of stuff would be really obviously less important, but they're links, right? And all I'm really trying to say here is you don't really want a lot of text to look like this, although it is very trendy. This kind of low contrast data is obviously it's very hard to read, especially with people who have limited eyesight, right? We talk about accessibility, and that means that everybody in the world should be able to consume your content, your app or your website or whatever. So I get the feeling whenever you do this, you're often doing it because you think it's trendy. And I would just urge you to please kind of fight back, right? You want it to be high contrast. You want to be able to read it nice and clearly. Stop, just try to control yourself with this low contrast text because it hurts quite a few users. All right, number 4, this is where we get into the really fun stuff, right? And actually, when we talk about color, a lot of people get really excited about it because they say, "Oh, finally, we get to get creative here. We can use purple and gold and bright green and all these colors." And the truth is that color mostly just comes from the brand, right? Like you could design very beautiful black and white wireframes. They would look spectacular. And then all I have to do is come along with my brand colors. This is going to be something that we talk about in a future class. Is it the colors of the brand? So, for example, like Microsoft and Google and Facebook, they all have their kind of key colors, and that's how they kind of add value or add colors to their apps and their websites and so forth. Now, in this case, we have Spotify. It's obviously, they have this bright green. It's really obvious. You can imagine what a call to action button looks like. All the rules that I mentioned before, you really only want to have one of these bright green buttons, otherwise it starts to disappear. And the other thing that I would mention here is obviously we're going to use sort of positive and negative colors when we have forms, basically just to show you're giving feedback to the user as to the forms. But all the information is coming from the brand and no random colors. You just bring it from the brand. It's nice and easy. In the case of the call to action and the client brand, if you wanted to have photography, you could maybe reduce the saturation. You could have like black and white photos, or just make sure that the color is kind of receded from the bright green. So that really stands out. All right, number 5, and this is probably something you'll do all the time. You have a whole bunch of links, you have a bunch of text, all right, and you're laying them out on the page or you're laying them out on the mobile screen. And one of the most important things for a junior designer is to be able to understand how to group elements in a rational, logical way. The most basic thing you could do to separate a group of links is to just put a rectangle around it or divide them up, with the kind of lines that divide them up vertically, for example. But that makes for kind of the clunky visuals, right? You would much rather separate them by gaps, right? So you have 32 pixel gaps or 64 pixel gaps. And as long as you keep using similar gaps, so you always use 16 or you always use 32 and so on and so on, I think the layout will actually look really nice and clean and consistent. If you don't think about those values, I think your layout is going to look a little bit clunky. And you've seen that in Figma, one of our #1 features that obviously they just borrowed it from Sketch is to hold down on a key like the Option key, and you can see the difference between two elements, right? They're 64 pixels apart or what have you. So that means that when you're laying on something as to the real UI design, you can just decide, okay, these are text blocks. The actual height is going to be about 4 pixels more than the font height or something like that. Once that's established, you can actually go through and say, okay, they're all separated by 32 pixels or something like that. Now, a more advanced design would actually have multiple gaps. So you might have a 16 pixel gap, a 32 pixel gap, and even a 64 pixel gap. And you should be able to explain to your manager or to the project manager what those different gaps mean, right? If you can answer that question, you can do everything. If you can't really answer that question, it means you have a little bit more work to do on this role. Those gaps, those different gaps, they mean something. All right, so a question for you guys, and I don't think I've really changed this since the last time I went through here. Which one is better, the top one or the bottom one? Which one is easier to read? What do you guys think?
Bottom one.
Bottom one, great.
Bottom.
Yeah, very good. And any reason, can you think of any reasons why it's better?
The size and also the proportion to the title.
Okay, all right. So the size, I think I just made it bigger. That's great.
Also
Anything else?
the margins, like it's the upper one is too long, so it's hard to read.
Ah, there we go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I just wanted to get to that. The fact that it's hard to read is probably something that everybody experiences, right? There's a lot of problems with it. One of the things that you'll know if you grab a novel or if you just read the New York Times or something like that, is that there's almost like a maximum length of legibility, right? There's almost like I'm willing to read a line that has about 15 words in it, but any more than that, and it starts to get really exhausting. And you might say, oh, well, the font is smaller. Yeah, but the real pain here is that the one on top has too many words in each line. That's the real rule that it's breaking. And as a result, your eyes start to get tired and you start to like, oh, I lost my place in line. That happens to everybody. Was there something else? There's too many words per line. Anything else? All right, the last one you mentioned here was the alignment. It should be left aligned or flushed on the left. This is basically the way your eyes work when you read really fast, right? They always kind of pin to the exact same location when you change lines. And if you use this kind of center block, again, this center block looks popular. You know, it looks like, oh, I've seen that on a lot of websites and stuff. Yeah, trust me, you do not want to read more than 100 words like this. It can be very exhausting. So yeah, any kind of these blocks should be left aligned, and it's much easier to read. And I think that's it. That's it. Obviously, typography, we have many more rules to go, but at this stage, pick one font, and obviously give everything the same font, make it left aligned. Titles, obviously, you can do titles that can be centered, but again, anything more than like 1 or 2 sentences, you should put into a block, a legible block as below. All right, this is a pretty simple one, but it's 2021. We do have to talk about accessibility. Accessibility is really simple. It basically just means like everybody in the world should be able to consume your website, and there are no rules. It's not like, oh, this is a website for young people or this is a website for seniors. It's no, the rules are everybody should be able to click anywhere they want in the web and read anything. And if they can't read your website, you're doing something wrong. And frankly, it's not really, it's not really a designer's role. It's more like you should really care about accessibility in general. So all you have to do is make sure that all the images have accessible tags, so that when somebody is using a digital reader, they will actually, correctly describe what's in the photo. Say they have limited eyesight and they listen to a digital reader, and that's going to help them to read the website properly. Anything else, just make sure that everything has accessible tags. And in some cases, you might want to make fonts larger. People obviously kind of zoom into text and things like that. But yeah, just make sure that everything is nice and clear, and you shouldn't have any problems. I've also heard people say that buttons need to be labeled in a certain way. For example, if you labeled something and you said, this is going to sound really janky, but if you labeled something like click here to see more, right? That doesn't really work when you're listening, or when you're listening to the website, because click here just, it doesn't really tell you anything. So links should indicate what you're going to do or where it's going to go, right? It's pretty simple. And as I always say, if you make this a priority and your client disputes it or disagrees, you might want to just throw these two articles at them and say, well, some people can get sued. So as I said, if your client is big and important, they should respect this, and they should see this as the web design or app design of the future. Just checking here. Oh, thanks, Michelle. I'm gonna put it. I'll get it while you guys are in the chat, and I'll add the link. Thank you very much. All right, now this is a really simple one, but I just wanted to explain the idea behind it. So when we talk about transitions or animation, first of all, everybody likes it. It's kind of a no-brainer, right? Like, there's nobody who says, I don't like animation. There's a lot of bad animation, but I think most people would generally assume that any kind, that animation is kind of delightful in its own way, but that's not really why it exists. So here's a very basic example that I just did. Hey, look, it animated. They didn't really animate. If you imagine this was a form and I kind of went from here to here, you would say, okay, so now the button's active, right? But that's not what animation is supposed to do. Animation is supposed to take up some time so that you can recognize that the user interface has changed, right? That's why it's great. When you play video games or you watch movies or something and you see things animating, maybe over the course of half a second, for example, it's enough time just to get your eye or to catch your eye. That's it. And again, when you talk about web design or app design, when something animates, it will catch your eye. And it's really just to let you know, hey, the interface has slightly changed because you did something, and hey, come check this out later. So, we might use a little bit of animation here. So obviously it's enough of a kind of a millisecond to let people see, oh, something has changed, and your eye kind of drifts towards there, right? That doesn't matter if it's off the screen. Obviously it doesn't really work. So it has to be visible in the screen and the user will see it. Any more animation than this, I like to think of this rule of thumbs. If the interface is changing, you have to let the user know. And animation can solve that role. All right, this is another one that is really, really a big idea, especially when you think of the big picture design. Progressive disclosure is a kind of a geeky term, but it's really great. It's really great. Progressive disclosure is essentially when you only ask users questions when you absolutely need them. Okay, so I always like to think about the onboarding experience. So for example, if you guys are on TikTok, a lot of people maybe just use TikTok for a couple days just to see what it's like or check it out. I did that, and then I eventually deleted it because I thought it was too addictive. So it's a lot of fun. One of the cool things I really loved about TikTok, and it was almost like a dream, was that you can download it and you can start using it and you can start engaging with the app for hours and hours and hours and hours without signing up. And I always think, like, this is something that we should have been doing for years now, right? And it's almost crazy. It almost goes against every business logic that you have in your mind, right? Like, every client will tell you, we need to know their name, we need to know their email address, blah, 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 blah. TikTok is saying, no, forget it. You can sign up, you can play with the app, and you'll see how cool it is. And The only reason we sign up to TikTok is so that you can comment, so that you can, continue on with your, how would I say this? All the app or all the video clips that you enjoy or all the video clips that you don't enjoy, you basically save that log. So it's kind of like your personality that is kind of in the app, and to actually start acting on it or make friends with people and so on, that's what you do to start an account. So you kind of build this kind of log of here's the videos that I like, and as you like more or dislike more, your feed of videos gets better and better. So progressive disclosure essentially means when you're onboarding, you ask as few questions as possible. This means that it's really delightful when people get a question from you. It's logical. It's like, when the iPhone or the Android, they'll say like, can we use your GPS? Because you're using the Maps app. It's a no-brainer, right? But if they asked you for your phone number, you'd be like, what are you talking about, right? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, this is progressive disclosure. Everything should be happy. Everything should be reasonable, and people will enjoy using your app. As I said, I've had lots of clients who asked me for kind of extensive information, like, oh, let's get their gender, let's get their age. And I just kind of shook my head. That kind of stuff you can put in the profile. You can always kind of put it in later, and you can say that the user is welcome to fill out that information if they really want to. Maybe it'll help their experience, but don't put it up front. Don't put it as like a barrier to using your app. And the last thing that I'm going to say here is, this is scientifically studied. It says that when people perceive that an app is well designed, is visually well designed, as in the previous 9 steps that we've talked about, they actually feel like an app is easier to use. So there is a direct connection when you use UI design, and it actually ties directly to the satisfaction that people have when they use your application. As you said, like fine wine. Right. Sorry. Right. So more aesthetic designs are actually under study. They are actually detected as easier to use, and that's what you want. All right. So we have a little example here. I'm going to drop you guys into a Figma chat. I'm just going to get the file in a second. Let's check it out. So essentially what I have is I have a mobile screen that is all text. And what I want you guys to do is to take the remainder of the class. It could be 15, 20 minutes, whatever. I want you to take one of them, and I want you to try to turn it into a visual design. So you can add colors, you can change the font, you can add photos and visuals. And actually this sort of artboard is supposed to be a portfolio. So many of you already have a portfolio or a website where you showcase your work, and you probably already have a good idea of what these portfolios are supposed to look like. So let's check it out. I'm just going to click on this link. I'm going to go into Figma. Let's see. Oh, sorry. There it goes. Zoomed in. Okay, so you can see here. If I wanted to translate this into an app. Now, is this a wireframe? No, not really. I actually wanted to make it even worse than a wireframe. It was literally just text blocks, because I want you guys to do that work, right? So you can make up a logo. You come here, you have all these links. You can decide where to put these links. Do they go at the top? Do they go at the bottom? A lot of this stuff, you can see there's some basic information about what these are. You can rearrange them, put them in the right order. You'll also know this red line here. You probably know this from, say, your graphic design studies and so forth. This is often known as the fold. If this was an iPhone 10, for example, this would essentially be the bottom of the phone. So you can think of all the important stuff, or the most important stuff should be above the fold. If it's a website, it's even more so, because people can just like bounce around and find a new website easily. So make sure everything above this red line is the really important stuff. And again, add visuals to it and so on. All right, so I'm going to just grab my, grab the link here, and I'm going to share this with you guys here. You can see I have a few others. Just make sure that you guys can edit it. And I'm just gonna put this up in the chat. You guys can come in here. All right, right on. All right. All right, everybody. 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes, and I'm gonna just jump in for a sec. So 2 more minutes. All right. All right. I'm just gonna share my screen for a bit. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. As I said, the idea here is that you should be able to reorder these blocks. And again, you have the link. Please try to get in. You can, work on it over the next couple of days if you have time. You should be able to translate these text blocks into a kind of a usable web interface or an app interface. Now, this kind of thing obviously is going to take, days and days and days. This exercise is very small, but it's just interesting to kind of try it out and see kind of some of what your thoughts are. And again, if you read some of these text blocks, you'll find, hey, there's a bunch of gibberish in here, but you could actually translate that. And that's what I've tried to do. So it says, feel free to transform these into visual assets. And I think I have an example here. Now, I obviously spent a little bit more time and I actually did a lot more kind of creative thinking with the text here, but let me just kind of go through a few ideas, right? This thing here is often referred to as the hero image. This hero is a word that we often use with the web, and you can talk about it on an app as well. But in this case, where it's essentially the hero image is, if this is my portfolio, it might be a photo of me. It might be a photo of me at the office. It might be a photo of me, working with, like UX research and that kind of thing. This obviously has like a mantra or a key phrase or something like that. It's kind of like a high impact photo. there's obviously going to be some text there. Maybe it's your name. I think it's more interesting if this is a web design website. You want to be highlighting something great that's going to keep people there, right? So a lot of companies, they'll highlight their latest projects and they'll say, check out this amazing app that we built, like Slack or something like that. Look at this amazing app that we increased their revenues by 26%. So that's the kind of thing that makes people stick around, rather than just a visual UI, because that's it's a little bit shallow, right? And you can see that a couple of things that I've done here. Obviously, these are incredibly huge brands, but the idea is that the brand is the thing that's exciting. Also, the fact that I've included numbers. This is something that I talk about a lot with junior designers. Is the hardest thing to get is to find these numbers. If you can say that we increased revenue, we increased conversions, we increased these various elements by whatever value, that's so much more important than just saying, look at this beautiful interface, right? I have a few things here. Obviously, I have popular names, and I've tried to get my increased. I increased something, and I need a number there. And you can see at the bottom, if I look over on the right side here, I can see more case studies. So I'm highlighting the top 3. The bottom here, this is going to be a logo, and a bunch of my links. I just kind of tucked them in the bottom, and I said, oh, sorry. I tucked my links at the bottom because they're less important. What I put at the top was not only did I have access to the link there, but I also pulled out this email function, because if I'm a developer or I'm a designer, I really want people to email me, let's talk about the future plans and whatever. So this header is going to be sticky. So if I scroll down, it's always going to be visible at the top of the screen. And I always want people to be able to easily email me. All right, just a couple more things I want to mention before we wrap up here. As beautiful as this work is, this UI design stuff is really, really important, but it's not really your job, right? Visual design is kind of like the low-hanging fruit, right? It's often given to junior designers or intermediate designers, whereas a lead and senior designer would be thinking about strategy of the app, how to make sure the app itself is a success. And where does that come from? It comes from doubling down on user research, like listening to the user, making sure that their needs are being met. As I said, once you've reviewed the user research, established goals for the projects, gotten approval from the client, this good design is kind of like our final priority. Because if the first 3 are already achieved, the good design is kind of it's a result. It's going to happen, right? If you input all these great things, you just need a few principles and good design will happen. If you want to double down on this, or if you want to read more about it, because obviously it's really valuable. If you have time, go get the Kindle or go get a book. It's a classic. Lots of people talked about it. It says here it's applicable to the web and mobile. Steve Krug's book is universal. It's basically makes everything easy to use and fun. It's a kind of UI designer's dream. So go check it out. The other thing that I always talk about is I love talking about Adobe's Creative Suite. I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that, but if you check them out on YouTube, you'll see that Adobe constantly puts UX videos out. They're often 2 hours long. You want to learn what a professional designer does, a real world-class designer does, go check it out. You can watch them on YouTube, and they'll talk about their process for 2 hours. Most of these actually have 3 videos. So it's a 6-hour breakdown of a pro designer, a world-class designer, talking through various projects and various apps. They're usually starting from scratch, and they're building a mock-up over the course of 6 hours. So please go check them out on YouTube. Again, I'm not getting paid for that, but it's obvious. You can learn from them. It's just a matter of time. If you can find the time, that's the hard part. All right, that's it for me. I just want to say thank you very much for coming. I know, again, it's a holiday, and I hope you guys are doing well and you're safe and everything's going well. I touched on it a little bit in this class. If you want, you can come back next week and we're going to learn about client branding. So if you're able to build something into a modern looking black and white wireframe, the next step is to add color. And that's almost certainly coming from the company. The company is going to have a marketing team. They're going to have standards like fonts and colors and so on. And you should be talking to them. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. So thanks very much. I hope you guys have a wonderful night and take care. All right. All right. Take it easy, guys. Have a good night. All right.